The abandoned parade floats stood like colorful monuments to shattered dreams along Independence Avenue, their red, white, and blue decorations fluttering in the wind as police helicopters circled overhead like mechanical vultures. Marching bands that should have been playing patriotic melodies had instead fled the downtown area in panic, leaving behind scattered sheet music and abandoned instruments. The silence was deafening where thousands of voices should have been singing in celebration of freedom. Emergency sirens wailed through the empty streets as SWAT teams swept every corner, searching for threats that existed only in the twisted imagination of one woman's desperate revenge. Just 6 hours earlier, the Harmony Heights Youth Choir had been rehearsing their final performance in the basement of St. Matthew's Baptist Church, their voices rising in perfect harmony as they practiced America the Beautiful for what was supposed to be the culmination of months of preparation. Director Angela Washington moved her hands with practiced precision, guiding 35 young voices aged 8 to 18 through the intricate arrangement that had earned them the honor of opening the city's National Independence Day Parade. Remember, this isn't just about hitting the right notes, Angela called out during a brief pause, her voice carrying the authority earned through 15 years of transforming young lives through music. We're representing our community, our church, and our city. When those cameras roll and the nation watches, they're going to see the best of what we are. 12-year-old Marcus Johnson raised his hand from the soprano section, his face glowing with excitement. "Miss Angela, my grandma said she's been waiting 70 years to see our choir on national television. She cried when I told her we got selected." The selection had indeed been competitive. The Harmony Heights Youth Choir had beaten out 14 other groups from across the metropolitan area, impressing judges with their technical skill, diverse repertoire, and the genuine joy that radiated from every performance. Their audition video, featuring a stirring rendition of "Lift Every Voice and Sing," followed by a rousing "God Bless America," had garnered over 2 million views on social media and caught the attention of parade organizers seeking authentic talent to showcase the city's cultural diversity. "We've worked too hard to let nerves get to us now," Angela reminded them as they prepared for another run-through. "Jessica, remember to project your solo in the bridge. David, watch my cues for the tempo change. Everyone, smile like you mean it, because the whole world is going to see that joy tomorrow." 3 miles away, in the manicured suburban neighborhood of Willowbrook Estates, Karen Henley sat in her pristine white Mercedes SUV outside the Premier Music Academy, her perfectly manicured fingers gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Her daughter Madison sat beside her in sullen silence, still wearing the black dress she had chosen for what was supposed to be her own audition callback for the parade's opening slot. "This is ridiculous. Madison, your voice teacher assured me you were the strongest candidate," Karen muttered, scrolling through angry emails she had sent to parade organizers, city council members, and anyone else whose contact information she could find online. "That scholarship you won last year, your performance at the governor's gala, your classical training, and they choose some church choir instead." Madison slumped lower in her seat, embarrassed by her mother's increasingly public campaign to overturn the parade selection committee's decision. At 15, she had inherited her mother's vocal talent, but none of her entitlement, and the rejection stung primarily because of how it had transformed her mother into someone she barely recognized. "Mom, maybe we should just accept it. There's always next year, and I have the regional competition coming up in August." "Accept it." Karen's voice rose to a pitch that made Madison wince. "Do you know how much money I've invested in your training, private lessons, summer programs, that voice coach who worked with Broadway performers? We didn't spend $30,000 for you to lose to some amateur group that probably can't even read music." The racial undertones in Karen's rant had become increasingly apparent over the past week, though she couched her prejudice in language about standards and qualifications. Her research into the Harmony Heights Youth Choir had revealed their predominantly black membership, their church affiliation, and their director's background in gospel and contemporary Christian music, all of which Karen had decided made them inherently inferior to Madison's classical training. That evening, as Karen researched every detail about the chosen choir, her anger crystallized into something more dangerous. She discovered that Angela Washington had once been arrested during a civil rights protest in college 20 years earlier, a fact that Karen decided was evidence of radical political associations. She found social media posts from choir members expressing support for various social justice causes, which she interpreted as extremist ideology. Most damning in her twisted logic, she learned that the choir had recently performed at a community rally protesting police violence, which she convinced herself was proof of their anti-American agenda. By midnight, Karen had constructed an elaborate conspiracy theory that transformed a youth choir's patriotic performance into what she characterized as a Trojan horse operation designed to spread radical propaganda during America's most sacred celebration. Her online research had led her down dark corners of the internet, where racial paranoia and conspiracy theories thrived, providing her with the vocabulary and framework to justify what she was planning. At 3 a.m. on July 4th, Karen made her first call to the FBI's domestic terrorism hotline. Her voice shook with calculated urgency as she provided what she claimed was intelligence about an imminent threat to the National Independence Day parade. "I need to report a credible terrorist threat involving the group scheduled to perform at today's parade," Karen told the agent who answered. "I've been monitoring communications from the Harmony Heights Youth Choir, and they're planning to use their performance platform to launch a coordinated attack on parade attendees and dignitaries." The FBI agent, trained to take all threats seriously, regardless of their apparent credibility, began asking detailed questions about Karen's claims. She had prepared thoroughly, providing specific names of choir members she claimed to have overheard discussing bringing the system down and making them pay for what they've done to our people. Every word was fabricated, but Karen delivered her lies with the conviction of someone who had genuinely convinced herself they were true. "Ma'am, what is your relationship to this organization, and how did you obtain this information?" the agent inquired. "I work in event security and have been conducting routine background checks," Karen lied smoothly. "I discovered that several members have connections to radical organizations and have been communicating through encrypted channels about using tomorrow's national platform for what they call revolutionary action. The threat appears imminent and specifically targets the parade route and viewing stands." Within 30 minutes, Karen's fabricated report had triggered federal terrorism protocols designed to prevent another 9/11-style attack on American soil. The FBI contacted local police, who alerted the Department of Homeland Security, who coordinated with National Guard units stationed outside the city. A web of emergency communications spread Karen's lies through every level of law enforcement with frightening efficiency. At 6 a.m., as Angela Washington arrived at the church to prepare for the choir's departure to the parade staging area, she found 3 police cruisers surrounding the building and 2 federal agents waiting at the entrance. "Ma'am, I'm Agent Sarah Coleman with the FBI. We need to speak with you immediately about your organization's planned activities today," the lead agent announced, her tone professional but unmistakably serious. Angela felt her stomach drop as she recognized the implications of federal agents appearing at her church on the morning of their biggest performance. "Agent Coleman, I'm Angela Washington, director of the Harmony Heights Youth Choir. Is there some kind of emergency? We're scheduled to perform at the parade in 3 hours." "That's exactly what we need to discuss." We've received credible intelligence suggesting your organization may be planning to use today's performance platform for activities that could endanger public safety. The absurdity of the accusation left Angela momentarily speechless. The idea that her young singers, who spent most of their time learning about harmony, discipline, and community service, could be considered a terrorist threat seemed like something from a nightmare. Agent Coleman, I think there's been a serious misunderstanding. We're a youth choir. We sing hymns and patriotic songs. The most dangerous thing we do is compete for solos. What kind of intelligence could possibly suggest we're a threat to anyone? Ma'am, I'm not at liberty to discuss the specific details of our investigation, but I can tell you that we take all threats to public safety very seriously. We're going to need to conduct immediate interviews with you and all choir members, and we'll need access to any communications, planning materials, or other documentation related to today's performance. As news of the investigation spread through emergency communication channels, the parade's security coordinator made the decision to cancel the opening ceremonies entirely. Better to disappoint thousands of attendees than risk a terrorist attack on live national television. The domino effect was immediate and devastating. By 8 a.m., local news stations had picked up reports of a credible terrorist threat that had forced authorities to shut down the Independence Day parade. Social media exploded with speculation, fear, and anger as residents learned their beloved annual celebration had been canceled due to unspecified security concerns. This is Channel 7 News, with breaking coverage of the developing security situation that has forced cancellation of this year's National Independence Day Parade. Announced reporter Lisa Martinez from her position outside the Police Command Center. Federal authorities are investigating what sources describe as a credible threat involving a local organization that was scheduled to perform during the opening ceremonies. The lack of specific details in official statements created a vacuum that conspiracy theories and racial paranoia rushed to fill. Online forums erupted with speculation about sleeper cells, domestic terrorists, and radical infiltration of American traditions. The very ambiguity that law enforcement maintained to protect the ongoing investigation became fuel for the wildest theories imaginable. At the Harmony Heights Youth Choir's emergency assembly in the Church Fellowship Hall, 35 young performers and their families faced a nightmare they could never have imagined. FBI agents conducted individual interviews with teenagers whose biggest previous encounter with law enforcement had been school assemblies about internet safety. Parents who had taken the day off work to watch their children perform on national television instead found themselves answering questions about their family's political affiliations and social media activities. "This is insane," whispered Janet Johnson, Marcus's mother, as she watched her 12-year-old son being questioned by federal agents. "These children have been practicing patriotic songs for months. They love this country. How did we become suspects?" The investigation revealed nothing suspicious because there was nothing suspicious to find. Choir members' phones contained typical teenage communications about rehearsals, schoolwork, and social plans. Their social media posts showed pictures from performances, family gatherings, and school events. The most controversial content agents found was a heated debate about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. But the damage was already done. Major corporate sponsors who had paid significant sums to associate their brands with the parade began withdrawing their support within hours of the security alert. Television networks scrambled to fill programming time that had been dedicated to live parade coverage. Hotel bookings canceled as tourists decided to avoid a city under terrorist threat. The economic impact rippled through every business that depended on the July 4th celebration for a significant portion of their annual revenue. "We're pulling our sponsorship immediately," declared Robert Sterling, marketing director for a major soft drink company. Our brand cannot be associated with any event that poses security risks to families. The safety of our customers is our primary concern." The irony was lost on him that the families he claimed to protect were the same ones being terrorized by false accusations and destroyed dreams. Karen's lies had created exactly the kind of fear and division that real terrorists sought to achieve. And she had accomplished it with nothing more than a phone call and a willingness to weaponize the country's security apparatus against people she had never met. By noon, as federal agents completed their fruitless investigation of the choir, a different kind of evidence began emerging. Detective Maria Santos, assigned to investigate the original threat report, had started tracing the anonymous tip that had triggered the entire crisis. Phone records, digital forensics, and witness interviews gradually revealed a pattern that pointed not to terrorist plots, but to personal vendettas. "Lieutenant, I think we have a problem with our terrorism investigation," Detective Santos reported to her supervisor. "The original threat report appears to have come from someone with a personal grudge, rather than genuine intelligence about criminal activity." The breakthrough came when investigators discovered Karen's extensive online research into the choir, her angry emails to parade organizers, and, most damning, a series of threatening messages that had been sent to choir members' social media accounts from an anonymous profile that traced back to Madison's IP address. "Mom, what did you do?" Madison confronted her mother that evening, as FBI agents executed a search warrant on their Willowbrook Estates home. "They're saying someone made fake threats against the choir kids and then reported them as terrorists. Please tell me you didn't." "I protected our community from people who hate everything we stand for," Karen replied, her voice lacking any trace of remorse. "If the authorities had done their job properly, they would have investigated that group's background before giving them a platform to spread their propaganda." The evidence against Karen was overwhelming. Digital forensics revealed that she had created multiple fake social media profiles to send threatening messages to choir members, then used those same threats as evidence when reporting them to federal authorities. Her search history showed extensive research into terrorism, reporting procedures, and the specific language needed to trigger maximum law enforcement response. Most shocking was the discovery that Karen had orchestrated a weeks-long campaign of harassment against the choir, creating false online reviews of their performances, sending anonymous complaints to their church, and even contacting local news stations with fabricated stories about their radical activities. Her goal had been to gradually build a case that would justify removing them from the parade lineup. But when those efforts failed, she had escalated to outright fabrication of terrorist threats. The public revelation of Karen's deception triggered a firestorm of national outrage. The story of a suburban mother who had weaponized America's terrorism fears to attack a children's choir captured headlines across the country, becoming a symbol of how racial prejudice and personal entitlement could threaten the very freedoms the 4th of July was meant to celebrate. "This case represents the absolute worst of what we've become as a society," declared civil rights attorney David Robinson during a press conference outside the federal courthouse. "A woman's inability to accept her daughter's disappointment led her to terrorize an entire community and weaponize our national security apparatus against children whose only crime was singing better than she thought they should." Mayor Patricia Williams, facing intense pressure to address the city's handling of the crisis, called an emergency press conference for July 6th. Standing before a packed room of reporters and community leaders, she delivered what many considered the most important speech of her political career. 2 days ago, our city witnessed the cancellation of our most cherished annual celebration due to threats that we now know were completely fabricated. Mayor Williams began, her voice heavy with emotion. 35 young people who had earned the right to represent our community on a national stage were instead treated as suspects in a terrorism investigation. Their families were subjected to interrogation and suspicion. Our entire city was deprived of a tradition that brings us together every year. The mayor's voice strengthened as she continued. I want to be absolutely clear about what happened here. This was not a failure of our security systems or our law enforcement agencies. This was the deliberate and malicious action of one individual who decided that her personal disappointment justified attacking children and terrorizing an entire community. She turned to address Angela Washington and the choir members who were seated in the front row. To the Harmony Heights Youth Choir, to Angela Washington, and to all the families whose dreams were shattered by these lies, I offer not just my personal apology, but the formal apology of this city. You deserved better from us, and we failed you when it mattered most. The mayor's announcement that the city would host a special independence celebration concert featuring the choir drew sustained applause, but the gesture felt inadequate compared to the magnitude of what had been lost. The moment of national recognition that could have transformed these young lives had been stolen, and no makeup performance could restore what Karen's lies had destroyed. Karen's arrest on federal charges of making false terrorism reports, cyber harassment, and conspiracy to incite public panic became the lead story on every major news network. The image of her being led away in handcuffs while trying to hide her face behind a designer handbag became an internet meme, symbolizing the fall of entitled privilege when confronted with the consequences of its actions. Your Honor, my client is a mother who made a serious error in judgment, but she never intended for the situation to escalate to this level. Karen's defense attorney argued during her bail hearing. She has no prior criminal record and poses no flight risk to the community. Federal Judge Robert Martinez was not impressed. Counselor, your client's error in judgment mobilized federal law enforcement resources, terrorized a community, caused hundreds of thousands of dollars in economic losses, and traumatized children whose only activity was singing patriotic songs. The intent may have been personal revenge, but the impact was community-wide terror. Bail is denied. The trial that followed revealed the full extent of Karen's deception and the psychological profiles that had driven her to such extremes. Expert witnesses testified about the dangerous combination of racial prejudice, parental entitlement, and social media echo chambers that had transformed a disappointed mother into someone capable of fabricating terrorist threats against children. The defendant spent weeks constructing an elaborate fantasy in which a youth choir's patriotic performance represented a threat to American values. Testified Dr. Patricia Chen, a forensic psychologist who had evaluated Karen. She had convinced herself that her lies were actually protecting the community, demonstrating how prejudice can completely distort an individual's perception of reality. The prosecution presented evidence showing that Karen had researched other communities where similar incidents had occurred, learning from previous cases where false reports had successfully disrupted events featuring predominantly minority participants. Her actions were not impulsive, but calculated, representing a deliberate strategy to weaponize fear for personal gain. Madison took the stand to testify against her mother, a decision that required extraordinary courage for a teenager whose family had been destroyed by her mother's actions. Her testimony revealed the toxic environment that had shaped Karen's worldview and the pressure Madison had felt to meet impossible expectations. My mom always told me I was better than other kids because of my training and our family's status, Madison testified, tears streaming down her face. When I didn't get selected for the parade, she said it was because of reverse discrimination and political correctness. I never thought she would actually try to hurt those other kids. I should have stopped her, but I was scared of making her even more angry. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours, before returning guilty verdicts on all federal charges. Karen's conviction on terrorism-related charges carried a sentence of 12 years in federal prison, forfeiture of all assets used in the commission of her crimes, and a lifetime ban from attending any city-sponsored events. The defendant's actions strike at the very heart of our democratic values. Judge Martinez declared during sentencing, "She weaponized our national security apparatus to attack children based on racial prejudice and personal spite. Her lies cost our community hundreds of thousands of dollars, denied thousands of families their annual celebration, and traumatized young people whose only crime was excellence in musical performance." The judge's voice grew stern as he continued, "Most disturbing is the defendant's complete lack of remorse for the harm she caused. Even today, she maintains that her actions were justified by her perception that she was protecting community values. This demonstrates a fundamental disconnect from reality that requires significant incarceration to protect society from similar future acts." Karen's assets, including her house, vehicles, and business investments, were seized to pay restitution for the law enforcement response, economic losses suffered by local businesses, and counseling services for the traumatized choir members. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, and her husband filed for divorce within weeks of her conviction. But the most significant transformation occurred within the Harmony Heights Youth Choir itself. The national attention generated by Karen's attack had an unexpected positive result. Donations poured in from across the country, allowing the program to expand significantly and offer scholarships to students who couldn't otherwise afford musical training. We received over $400,000 in donations from people who were horrified by what happened to us, Angela Washington explained to reporters 6 months after the incident. "We've been able to start 3 new community choirs, purchase new instruments and equipment, and create a scholarship fund that ensures no child is denied access to music education because of financial constraints." The choir's rescheduled performance, held during the city's Martin Luther King Day celebration in January, drew a crowd of over 50,000 people and was broadcast live on multiple networks. Their rendition of "America the Beautiful" was viewed by millions online, finally giving them the national platform that Karen had tried to destroy. Marcus Johnson, now 13 and serving as the choir's student leader, spoke to the crowd before their performance. 8 months ago, someone tried to silence our songs because they didn't think we deserved to be heard. But music is stronger than hate. Harmony is more powerful than discord. And the truth always finds a way to shine through lies. His words, delivered with the confidence of someone who had learned that his voice mattered, brought tears to the eyes of audience members who remembered the fear and confusion of that canceled July 4th celebration. The transformation of these young people from victims of false accusations to symbols of resilience and hope represented the best possible response to Karen's attempt to divide their community. The policy changes implemented in response to the crisis included new verification protocols for terrorism reports, mandatory bias training for emergency dispatchers, and community liaison positions designed to prevent similar misunderstandings in the future. Several other cities adopted similar reforms proactively, hoping to avoid their own incidents of weaponized emergency services. Angela Washington, thrust into national prominence as an advocate for arts education and civil rights, used her platform to address the broader issues that had made Karen's attack possible. Her testimony before Congress about the importance of community arts programs and the dangers of unchecked prejudice helped secure federal funding for similar programs nationwide. What happened to our choir wasn't really about one woman's phone call, Angela explained to a packed Senate hearing room. It was about systems that are ready to believe the worst about Black communities and respond with overwhelming force before asking basic questions about what's actually happening. We can't prevent people like Karen from harboring prejudice, but we can build safeguards that prevent their hatred from destroying innocent lives. Madison Henley, separated from her mother's toxic influence and placed in the care of her grandmother, eventually found her own voice through community service and advocacy work. Her courage in testifying against her mother had helped secure justice, but it also represented a young person's decision to choose truth over family loyalty when the stakes were high enough. I spent years trying to live up to my mother's impossible standards, Madison wrote in an essay that was published in several national magazines. I thought success meant being better than other people, instead of being the best version of myself. The choir kids she attacked were everything I should have aspired to be: talented, hardworking, and genuinely happy to share their gifts with others. They showed me what real excellence looks like. 3 years after Karen's conviction, the annual Independence Day Parade had been restored to its former glory, with new traditions that explicitly celebrated the diversity that made the community strong. The Harmony Heights Youth Choir's performance had become the festival's signature opening act, with their story serving as a reminder of how quickly freedom could be threatened and how important it was to protect it vigilantly. On a quiet Sunday morning, as Angela Washington prepared for another rehearsal with her expanded choir program, she reflected on the strange journey that had brought national attention to their humble church basement. The walls were now lined with awards, photos from their television appearances, and letters from children across the country who had been inspired by their story. Places. Everyone. She called to the 60 young voices now part of the program. Remember, we're not just making music today. We're proving that harmony is always stronger than discord, that truth always outlasts lies, and that the most beautiful songs come from voices that refuse to be silenced. As their voices rose together in perfect harmony, filling the space with joy and purpose, the memory of Karen's attempt to destroy them felt like a distant nightmare from which they had finally awakened. The false accusations that were meant to end their story had instead become the beginning of something far more powerful than they could have imagined. The children who had been interrogated by federal agents as potential terrorists now sang with the confidence of young people who knew their voices mattered. The community that had been divided by lies was now united by a shared commitment to protecting the dreams of its youngest members. And somewhere in a federal prison, Karen Henley served her sentence with the knowledge that her attempt to silence their songs had instead amplified them for the entire world to hear. In the end, the Harmony Heights Youth Choir's story became more than just a cautionary tale about the dangers of false accusations and racial prejudice. It became a testament to the resilience of communities that refuse to let hatred define them, the power of young voices that insist on being heard, and the possibility that even the most destructive lies could inadvertently create opportunities for truth, healing, and positive change that extended far beyond their original intended harm. The songs that were meant to be silenced had become anthems of hope, proving that harmony would always triumph over discord when communities chose to listen with their hearts instead of their fears. And every time the choir performed, their voices carried the message that had sustained them through their darkest hour: that truth, like music, has a power that no lie can ever completely destroy.